Our guest today is Keith Kube from Crofton, who recently ran for the 40th District legislative seat unsuccessfully, Keith. But it's kind of a good news, bad news situation for us here. The bad news is he didn't win the 40th District seat. The good news for us is we get to retain him as a commentator on WJG weekday mornings, Tuesdays and Thursdays. So going forward, be listening for that. But Keith, first of all, let's talk a little bit about your background. You were born and raised in Crofton.
Born and raised on the farm, lived there and farmed with my father and grandfather. It was the roots and the beginning of understanding what self-sufficiency was. Like we all do on farms, if we had a flat tire, we couldn't call a AAA. We fixed it. And so as life goes, one thing that I'm noticing in society, even when I talk to the schools in our upcoming generation, is that they have the inability to really not solve problems. They are not able to, in fact, figure out how to sustain themselves. Mm-hmm. And having this problem-solving skill is one of the things that I did as my career, and I'd like to hope that would be something that would be valued in society going forward. And so when I tell the kids in school, why are they there? It really boils down to they're not there to learn something. They're to learn to repeat what they've learned so that they can teach others to make the world a better place as well. And again, if we don't do that, then of course, if we don't repeat what we've learned, it's like picking apples and leaving them in the basket to rot. It doesn't do any good.
You can listen all you want, but sooner or later you got to take some action.
You've got to, in fact, be able to repeat what you've said. And if everybody did that, I would believe that we would have the world a little bit better place. But then, of course, this political correctness comes along and says that it's not nice to tell people what to do. But there again, if there's things that are happening in society which are not sustainable or not making things better in the bigger picture, what are you supposed to do? Just let them do that, and it's going to cost us all money if, in fact, they don't stop it.
You know, it's frog in the boiling pot of water scenario, though. There are people who are ascribing to certain movements, and I don't think they even realize how destructive the movement might be and the greasy road they're going down and the big ditch they're going to find themselves in here in a few years.
Without a doubt. And again, as all these causes happen, it is incrementalized. It is just a little at a time, and it is the boiling pot and the frog syndrome. And all we can do as individuals is to have us individually tell our friends and loved ones the same thing so they can tell their friends and loved ones the same thing so that these boiling pot syndromes don't come up and burn us.
Yeah. You know, you go back to the media and how our news is addressed and presented to us. Until people like Rush Limbaugh came along, and then Fox News, and then every other conservative commentator that was really sprung from that, and I mean that's where you now have both sides being presented to you, and so, but that continues with every generation. You have to re-educate every generation about both sides of the issues.
It's a continual process. There's no standing still. The fact of the matter is, if you don't take care of it, somebody will, and there will be somebody who has an adjustment or a cause which is more self-serving and not necessarily to your advantage, but of course they need bodies to, in fact, agree to that. Mm-hmm. And it's just the same with democracy. We don't live in a democracy just because I can vote to take your car, because that's how democracy works. Isn't how this is supposed to work. We are in a republic, which means we have laws that says that I can't vote to take your car. And so as we're going forth in society as well, if we do not stop some of this unfairness, it gets to the point where that unfairness is thought to be acceptable and advantageous, and therefore, if it's dishonest, but it likes it, it'll continue on, and, of course, unintended consequences occur.
You made an interesting comment before we went on the air, and I'm not sure who you attributed this to, but the United States was a country built by geniuses that any idiot could run.
Exactly right. George Washington, I consider one of the great leaders in this country. The thing that was really interesting about him is that he didn't want to be king or thought as king. And he said, I am not the issue here. It's the systems that we leave behind. And in the management world, whenever I found a manager that asked, when I asked them, what would happen if you were here or were gone, if something happened to you, he says the business would implode. And he says, then you're not a good manager, because if in fact the system can't go on after you're gone, you've done yourself a disservice and you've made the problem worse. Which means we live in a country built with systems of which we have people that are managing it to run in a way which is sustainable. And reinventing the wheel every time a new legislation comes along, or if they want stuff done, it really boils down to let's do the stuff that got us here. It may not be perfect, but it's the best system that we've got, considering all the worst alternatives.
Well, and you and I have had a lot of conversations, private conversations, about what really is going on in the world, things that are presented as conservative. I'll use the state legislature as an example. We just think that because we live in a red state that everybody in Lincoln is red, and the fact that it's a unicameral really hides a lot of things, doesn't it?
It does hide a lot of things, and again, have it to the point where there's a disadvantage. The unicameral is essentially our House of Representatives. And again, it's based on population. But then we've got Western districts, which, like the Senate, every state has two. We don't have representation on the western half of the state, nearly to the point whereby their interests are protected. And so having an alternative there, it is democracy in this fact as I want to vote to take your car, and I don't care if you like your car. If I want it, I get to vote, and if everybody in the room agrees, then of course you lose your car. That's not how it's supposed to be, and so I'd like to get it to the point whereby our property tax, which is essentially has an unfairness element in it, it's more occupational specific, but again, there's people in the urban areas that kind of like it the way it is, and of course they'll say, well, there's subsidies that are going back and forth of which the farmers are in fact getting. And again, this tax code has been so band-aided for so long that it does, in fact, have different difficulties or inconsistencies in it, which are caused by the Band-Aid. Now the Band-Aid is over a foot thick, and everybody's afraid to tear it off.
Well, you be listening going forward on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings. Keith will be delivering some commentary, but we thought we'd have him in here just to give you some background, Keith's background, and lay some of the groundwork, the foundation from which a lot of the commentary will come from. And we will invite anybody to issue responses if they like, or Keith, I know you'd like to engage people. You'd love it when people contact you.
I enjoy talking to the people, and I guess as far as it stands, these conversations I always like to do, what problem are we really trying to solve? I know there's people out there that don't like things the way they are, but of course, complaining isn't the approach. It comes down to the point whereby let's put a target on the wall, because if you go to the target range and you can't see what you're shooting at, you're never going to hit it. So in the same way here, we have to define what our final outcome is supposed to look like so that we can at least make sure that if we're herding cats, they're going in the right direction.
Keith is the author of a couple of books, too. Just real quick, tell us about the books that are out there that people can buy to find out a little bit more about you.
Thank you. They're on Amazon. One is called The Grand Unification Theory of Business and Success, which is essentially a model on how to get government to run like a business, or any business to run like a business, and have it to the point where it subscribes to good business health. And the second book is Integrity Starts with I, which is an approach whereby we always analyze any kind of concern that we have to make sure that we're solving the problem and not the symptom.
All right. Well, you can pick up either of those books on Amazon, and that's going to tell you a lot about our guest today and the commentary that he'll be making here on WJG. How can folks contact you, Keith?
Feel free to call me at 402-388-4511, or you can reach me on email at keithkube@gmail.com.